Hi everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Meredith.
My name is Madison.
I'm Ariana.
This is the Developing Intercultural Communication Competency panel presentation. These are some of our classmates from the Communication 143 class. They're going to be talking about some of their research as well as their areas of interest regarding the area of developing intercultural communication competency.
So our first presenter is Angel Austin. Angel is a second-year education major who's minoring in psychology. She enjoys working with other people and feels that it's her purpose in life to use her sensitivity, creative skills, and diverse cultural background to help make a difference in someone's life. And she's going to be talking about interracial relationships.
Hi. Yes, I am conducting a research paper on interracial relationships, and I am specifically focusing on the common issues that occur in interracial relationships. And these issues include religious differences, differences in values, especially with raising children, differences in education levels, and most importantly, the differences in the way that the individuals in interracial relationships communicate with one another. And these everyday struggles contribute greatly to the successes of future interracial marriages. So much like any situation, you need background information and context. And with interracial relationships, it started with extreme amounts of hatred. And it's only been 50 years since the United States has legalized mixed marriages all across the country. And so because of this, since the 1960s Loving versus Virginia case and the legalization of interracial relationships, these different interracial lifestyles across the country and integration of different races has gained a ton of popularity since then. And it's important that understanding how these interracial relationships came to be the way that they are today can open our minds to the different aspects that make it as complex as it is. Furthermore, our exposure to the different races are everywhere around us, and they happen every single day with every single thing that we do. So through schools, work, personal information, or personal relationships, we can gain knowledge to further expand our openness and understanding for the people we integrate with. Lastly, communication is key. Speaking up when something is culturally or morally wrong to you is very important to build a relationship with anyone. Also, sharing your beliefs and thoughts on how you have lived your life and how you would like to continue to live your life can also greatly help you continue to move forward in that prospective relationship. And being able to clearly and effectively communicate with the partners we have in life can create a better platform for any individual that decides to engage in any sort of relationship with another race. Thank you.
Thank you, Angel. Next we have Kayla, and she is a sophomore education major, minoring in psychology. She's working towards getting her special education credential, and she hopes to help families cope and understand family members with disabilities. And she's going to talk to us about her research.
Hi, so my research has been primarily about intercultural communications within the classroom, with a focus on special needs classrooms in particular. So there are three things that are really important for professionals to remember in their classroom. First of all, you need to be able to recognize other cultures. All teachers should be aware of their own cultural identification as well as their students'. And a professional should never assume that their students either share their cultural values or share their culture in general, because this leads to westernized blinders, which is a big issue within American school systems today. This is because most professionals in the education system are Euro-American, and actually a majority of them are female. So this leads to this large issue of not being able to see culture because they assume everyone around them is going to have the same or similar cultures. Second, a professional needs to, after recognizing the cultural differences, they need to inform themselves. So this could be as easy as, opening your computer and getting and Googling their culture and trying to figure it out on your own. Or if you have a relationship with the family or the student, you can ask them about their cultural identity, how their family celebrates different traditions, their values, and their beliefs. Yeah, and then lastly, as professionals, all education professionals should be able to integrate and, incorporate this information into their classroom. So if you have a student that perhaps came from another country and is not used to working on projects like alone, and the competition between singularly working on your project, maybe, putting them in group and having group projects instead of just having that student work. So these 3 steps will help every professional, not only in education, but especially in education, be able to talk and communicate efficiently, not only with students, but family members in education. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Our next presenter is Leanne Matthews. Leanne is a junior majoring in education. She's earning her multi-subject teaching credential with a concentration in teaching English to speakers of other languages. And she's going to be talking about culturally responsive teaching.
Hi. Okay, what is culturally responsive teaching? Well, I believe that this is when a teacher has a higher level of cultural competence and is able to impress this knowledge and understanding on their students. As learned in class, cultural competence is having awareness of one's own cultural identity, as well as, and different views, as well as being able to learn and build knowledge of varying cultures and community norms in their classroom. Why is this important? Well, there is a huge cultural gap in public schools across the U.S. Statistics show that minority students make up half of the average classroom, and that 1 out of every 5 students speak a language other than English in their homes. This shift is causing many teachers to struggle with how to better help these students. And the answer to this question is cultural responsiveness. It is important because it allows you to empower your students academically, socially, and emotionally. So how to become a culturally responsive teacher? 1, learn about your students' culture and show an interest. 2, value. Possibly create a cultural celebration within your classroom and invite their parents to join. And lastly, adapt. Adapt your teaching styles to your students' culture to better help them as an individual rather than just a number in a room. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Next, we have Nicole, and she's a junior majoring in diversified studies with a concentration in special education. She's a member of Greek Life here on campus and is also a tiger dancer. She's going to be talking to us about the level of social distance between members of public and people with disabilities.
Hi everyone. So my research is off of the level of social distance which people prefer to keep between themselves and those with disability. And negative attitudes towards disabilities have been one of the main barriers for those who have disability in order to achieve social equality. And this study is to describe the social distance which members of the public prefer to keep between themselves and those with disability. And I have seen some research which shows that individuals feel more comfortable to surround themselves with ones that look like them or similar to, which will create a closer social distance. However, in contrast, if a person seems to have abnormal behaviors or identity or seems unusual, that person will like to keep a greater social distance, which creates a negative barrier for inclusion. I also like to talk about some takeaways, and that would be to not refer to a person as disabled, rather a person with a disability. And the person will always be who they are, as well as what they like, feel, see, or even do is not defined by their challenges. And lastly, we all have different frames of mind, so we should interact with the person and not the disability.
Thank you, Nicole. Our next presenter is Cameron Williams. Cameron's a junior, HESP major. She aspires to be a PA and believes that this class will help enlighten intercultural communication differences between physicians and patients. And she's going to be talking about intercultural communication between healthcare professionals and patients.
Yes, so hi, my name is Cameron, and my study is based on how to increase cultural competency in the health field. So no matter like what your cultural background is, all you want to know is when you go to see like the doctor or a nurse, you want to know what is wrong with you medically, and you want to understand it in the most simple language. And a lot of times that's difficult because most of the time there are patients that don't have English as their first language or have different cultural beliefs about medicine. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to interview a retinal facility here in Stockton, and the majority of their patients are of Hispanic background and English is not their first language. However, they only have one workup technician who speaks Spanish and one doctor out of, I believe there's 9 doctors, and he's the only one who can speak Spanish. And so not all of the Spanish speaking patients can go to him on his certain day. And so I'm going to do some research about how maybe like the other doctors can make it more comfortable when they go in for the patients to see them. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. Next we have Shay, and she's a transfer student from San Diego Mesa College. She's currently a freshman majoring in political science, and she's considering a minor in gender studies. It's her goal to attain a graduate degree in sociology, and she is a Marine Corps veteran. She serves San Joaquin County as a veteran service officer and advocate, and she sits on various boards and councils of veteran-centric nonprofits. She is one of the 3 students that is assisting Dr. Dong's intercultural communication class and his research on ethnocentrism within college campuses.
Good afternoon, everybody. As stated, I am participating in the study with Dr. Dong. So the purpose of our study is focused on UOP students' perceptions of themselves and others in terms of cross-cultural fluidity. So it seeks to kind of gauge the overall degree of ethnocentrism and that faculty currently encounter in their students, as well as what factors influence it. So the main topics that we will be addressing are willingness to interact with people of other cultures, strengths and weaknesses in cultural identity, previous exposure to multiculturalism, social emotional intelligence as a potential catalyst for increased awareness. And the method that we use to conduct this study is a survey method and the test group was UOP students across several disciplines and age groups within the campus community. So we asked questions that would help us identify maybe personality types within the test study, views of self and views of others, perceptions of world culture, strength of cultural identity, willingness to communicate, and demographic information. So the results are still pending, but we hope that the study will actually clarify some questions we have about the relationship between attributes that promote intercultural communication competence and attitudes that inhibit it. So why does this study matter? Well, first of all, we do care about intercultural communication competency at UOP for 3 different reasons. Students here have a high degree of contact within other cultures, within the classroom environment, while participating in campus activities, and in dorm life or while playing sports. Another reason is that students at UOP come from all walks of life. And so that being said, it's important to understand that the population we are surrounded by, our faculty and administrators, or for our faculty and our administrators to anticipate strengths and weaknesses that we as the students have or might embody. So, and understanding how ethnocentrism or ethno-relativity in our student body will really help us to gauge the willingness to communicate cross-culturally, willingness to build relationships with people that maybe we would typically see as a member of an out-group in situations outside of university life. So also how likely are we to study abroad or take certain classes that are outside of our comfort zone. And because college is kind of a stepping stone towards a more enlightened life, it can also propel us into careers that really play significant roles in society. So upon graduation, we need to have already become more cultured people and be able to see, leave this place with more tools in our toolbox than when we came. So as a generation who grew up around technology, we kind of have already witnessed the effects of globalization and to some degree already participated in cultural exchanges with people from all over the world. So we need to be able to be equipped to establish business relationships, influence politics and legislation, teach our children to be more aware, and create a more inclusive America. So when we think about ethnocentrism and ethno-relativism, we are really asking how closed-minded versus how open-minded people are in terms of being able to coexist with other cultures. So are we more likely to find similarities or differences? Are we more likely to shy away from opportunities to get to know somebody from other cultures? Do we take interest in the traditions or language of other cultures? How much satisfaction do we get from having those experiences? So the truth is that ethno-relativism is a learned behavior, and so the process for attaining the ability to acknowledge that other cultures exist, accept that presence and their influence in society, and kind of integrate some of their culture into our lives is shaped by many different things, such as our interpersonal skills, emotional intelligence, confidence, self-awareness. So I'm very happy for the opportunity to participate in this study with Dr. Dong, which I hope we will learn a lot about the students and how we are contributing to the climate here at UOP and possibly determine what we can do about that going forward. So it's definitely going to be interesting to finalize all the data and interpret that.
Thank you, Shay. Our next presenter is Bianca. Bianca is a second-year HESP major that wants to go into the field of physical therapy. She finds interest in learning about different cultures, and intercultural communication influenced her to research about her abstract on the influence of accents on social perception.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Bianca, and my abstract is on the influence of accents on social perception. So a person's accent can affect the way that they are perceived as an individual. It can affect their perception of level of intelligence, and there are many stereotypes associated with different accents, and in-group language preferences, and the all-sound-alike phenomenon of unfamiliar accents. So these biases can lead to a great amount of accent discrimination and reduce credibility of foreign speech, which can greatly impact a person's probability of employment and how they are perceived in their occupations. On the other hand, certain accents are considered to be more attractive or prestigious than others and may influence our unconscious tendency to mimic their speech patterns. In recent studies, there have been examples of such language difficulties of understanding. In an article between a Filipino call center and an Australian customer, Filipino call centers tend to have a struggle of understanding their speech because they have different speech patterns, and the recent studies found that Australians didn't have a hard time of understanding the Filipino accent because they had a high credibility of language competency. They were able to understand the language differences because they were able to dissect their accent as well as the different patterns of speech. And this shows that as the global society is becoming more increasingly interconnected, there is increased contact between native and non-native speakers of languages, and it is important to be aware of how accents can alter our judgments of others, especially in English-dominant countries whose populace is becoming more multicultural. So some takeaways from this study is that with a greater understanding, we can attempt to move towards a greater acceptance of and respect for others and their cultures. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. Next we have Eric, and he's a sophomore majoring in communications, and he's also on the SIM team. He's going to be talking about his research on intercultural marriage and relationships.
Thank you, Meredith. This semester I'll be conducting research on intercultural relationships and marriage. My study will be primarily centered around success rates, relationship satisfaction, and obstacles and/or challenges within those relationships. I plan to create a survey via SurveyMonkeys and offer it to online potential participants who are currently in or have been in intercultural relationships. My survey will include questions regarding basic demographics as well as specific relationship-oriented questions on satisfaction and challenges, if any. In addition, I will also be asking for volunteers to take part in a face-to-face interview in order to gather personal testimony on intercultural relationships and experiences as well. I believe this research is imperative due to the largely increasing number of intercultural relationships in today's society. To provide some background information towards the topic, a 2015 study showed that nearly 10% of all marriages consisted of spouses of a different race or ethnicity background, which is up from 3% since 1980. I believe the findings in this research can not only be used for clearer understanding of intercultural relationships, but will also contribute to intercultural communications as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Our last presenter is Casey Scott. Casey is a communication major and plays golf here at Pacific. He's going to be talking about student athletes from other countries transitioning into American Division I sports.
Thank you. So I did my research on the challenges international students face with traveling to the United States and why they come to the United States to play at the Division I level. If you guys don't know what the Division I level means, it's the highest level of amateur play in the world. So there are Division II and Division III in other countries, but it's just not as competitive as we have here in the United States. There are a lot of international athletes, most of them playing individual sports like golf and tennis. According to the research, 33% of tennis rosters are filled with international students for male and female sports, and golf is at 12.5%. Some of the biggest struggles that international students face are with language barrier, homesickness, and cultural difference. And coming from a team that is 40% international, I see it on my team all the time, especially with the language barrier and the cultural differences. With technology getting better and better each year, I don't see so much homesickness with apps that you can text your family and FaceTime back home. But with support from not only teammates but from classmates as well to help them get through those challenges, it is very easy to help them feel like they're at home. To kind of compare the research to the student athletes here at Pacific, like I said earlier, golf is 40% for just males. We don't have a female program here. Tennis, out of the 11 male tennis athletes, 9 of them are from different countries. And for female, it's out of the 10, 5 of them are from different countries. So they're both over 50%. And our field hockey program, out of the 21 females they have, 11 of them are from different countries. To conclude, I'd like to say that welcoming international athletes, not only is just because they're on their team, but helping them feel at home, it'll help keep the Division I level very competitive because they seem to take up a lot of the student athletes here at Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you to all presenters for sharing. We're now going to have Ariana, a respondent, kind of reflect on each of our presenters' topics.
So Angel, both of our research topics are so similar. Specifically, I think that it's important to study how intercultural couples raise their children, because I think that's it's a big issue within, I think, the relationship before the children are born and even after, which way they're going to, persuade their child culturally. So I think that that's very important and something that's in your study that not in mine. Kayla, you and Leanne have similar research topics as far as cultural competence in the classroom and the integration of cultural knowledge from both teachers to their students. And obviously that is incredibly important as the teachers need to have an understanding of all different cultures that are within the classroom, and that'll help them better learn as everything as a whole. Nicole, I think, again, a great topic as far as social distance between people of the public and those with a disability, because obviously it's very apparent and it's even on campus, anywhere, you can tell that there is a distance between the two, and it's important to define that and try and compress that. Cameron, definitely another very important and prominent topic as far as intercultural competence in the health field, because with the increasing number of, intercultural and biracial people in not only Stockton but all across America, it's important that all physicians have a way that they can communicate with all individuals from different cultures, so that communication between the two is efficient. And Shay, great topic. I think, as far as defining and differentiating the difference between ethnocentrism and ethno-relativism on campus, and how, we can define what inhibits that and what promotes it is really important, because it's important that we, that we move people who are ethnocentric more toward ethno-relativism, as, like I said earlier, cultures and people of different races are more and more prominent in our community. Bianca, again, a super great topic, and something, like you mentioned about the study with the call center, that's something I definitely, when calling Apple or anybody for help, and getting someone who has a very thick accent, it's like, all right, here we go. I'm gonna have to repeat myself over and over, but I think it's very important because, and like you said, the how some are more, deemed more attractive or prestigious than others and have stereotypes surrounding them. I think it's very important to establish and define those. And Eric, our topics again are very, very similar as far as research, and I think that statistic you gave about 10% in 1 year and then 10 years later it jumped to 28%. I think that's incredible, and obviously it's becoming more and more prominent within our generation, at least, as far as intercultural marriages and relationships go. And Casey, again, another really great topic. I actually didn't realize how big the intercultural student base is in athletics here, especially tennis being 9 out of 11. And I think it's important because it must be, I can't imagine how hard it would be for somebody from a completely different country to, integrate themselves into our lifestyle, let alone a Division I sport. So I think it's very, very important that we, define those issues and elaborate on what it is that makes them, like you said, homesick and things like that, and then learn ways to hopefully make that transition easier for them.
If anybody has a question, go ahead and ask.
For the education majors, there's the current ESL classes right now at elementary school. Do you know of any programs being established to maybe enhance the ESL classes? My experience, I came from Mexico. First thing, I didn't speak a lot of English. They put me in 5th grade. They put me in any ESL class, and I wasn't learning as much. Now when they put me in next year in the 6th grade, they put me in the all-speaking class, the English-speaking classes. That really, the immersion, really is what skyrocketed my understanding of English. Is the ESL program faulty, or is there something you education majors know that are improving that program?
So my concentration is actually teaching English just because of other languages, TESOL, and so I'm really interested in this. I have seen good and bad programs. I work at a school in Stockton right now, and I work with the English learners in an after-school program, and I know little Spanish. I just spent a month in Guatemala and learning Spanish with UOP, but still, I am the only person that speaks Spanish there, and like I said, I'm still very basic level of Spanish, and so I feel that our teachers need to match our students. So we have such a high number of Spanish speakers, and I feel that it's very important to have more Spanish-speaking teachers in the classroom to make them feel more comfortable. Yeah, I definitely hope to see that school improve with their faculty and just making it, I mean, like I said, my Spanish is not that wonderful, but they see that I'm trying to speak Spanish, so they try to speak English in return, and we kind of help each other out in that way. But yeah, I'd definitely like to see it improve with just kind of matching our students' needs with our teachers as well. So.
I have a question. I was wondering if you had any, in any of your readings, people talked about, I think there's a change of feeling of, especially with the interracial couples, that you do have to choose an identity, but you are also, and so there's a pull between having an identity that's not a dominant, but then also becoming part of the dominant culture, and if there's any balance, if you guys read anything about any kind of balance of that between maintaining your identity and then losing your identity, and any reflections on that?
I feel like it depends on the culture each individual in the relationship is coming from, as far as how much they differ. Like say, I mean, a Caucasian with someone from an Asian culture, those tend to be very, up and down. I think it's just a matter of finding a common medium between the two of you that you can both agree on, especially as far as like childbearing. Finding a happy medium that you can both agree on as far as what you want your children to, learn and grow up to identify as.
Somebody did a journal article presentation.
I did, yes. I actually did a journal article presentation on intercultural marriages between Asian and Caucasian spouses, and the study showed that within marriages between Caucasian men and Asian women, the Asian women were actually more inclined to pick up on the Caucasian men's culture. And they didn't give a specific reason for that, but one reason that was hypothesized was because that Caucasian culture is viewed as more dominant, coming from the male's background. So that was just one study that I've already done, geared toward my research, that found sort of that identity, which identity you take in the relationship.
My personal research is also focusing on this identity formation, identity negotiation. So one of the things I feel that so my own research shows that it's a bicultural identity is the way to go. Meaning that it's no matter what you do, either you are kind of develop a relationship or deal with some kind of cultural conflicts, and it's always a kind of people are balanced between this dominant identity versus another kind of identity. So clearly, the research shows that it's bicultural identity tend to be more comfortable kind of identity because that is usually increased higher self-esteem. But the other part is, say, isolation or like kind of dominating another identity. Usually that tend to lead into kind of the very kind of extreme kind of situation. So I feel that it's no matter what we do, it's a finding. I agree with Ariana said that it's a finding that balance, the good balance between those identities. That's really critical. One of the things I heard that Cameron is talking about this medical field. I really kind of fascinating about this. Nowadays, the medical field facing a lot of kind of challenges because the communication between doctor and nurses and the technicians versus doctors, and also there's so many cultural variations, elements, and I think that to study what you are talking about and you are aiming at is really beneficial for your career. during your study or in terms of your literature review, what do you feel that is the most challenging element facing in this kind of the doctor and nurses and facing the medical field?
I think the most difficult thing is being able to communicate with the patients and communicate with the nurses, and everyone has a different idea of medicine. For example, in my abnormal psychology class, it's more like a behavioralist view, whereas I believe in more of a physiological view. And so it's difficult to balance just like people's, not only their cultural background, but also just like their thoughts and their values, that maybe their culture has influenced them. And so one of my literature reviews found that people who did a year residency outside of their homeland, so if someone from the United States went to Sweden, it wouldn't necessarily help them with Swedish patients. It would more generally help them with like developing ideas of how to better communicate with patients of different cultural backgrounds. Thank you.
I wanted to kind of add to that as somebody who has nothing to do with the field that you're going into, but I was learning. I learned some shocking things in my gender studies class about people of ethnic background, especially, end up because either of being low income or not understanding what's being done, like at the hospitals. Sometimes they end up getting treatment or procedures that they don't necessarily want or need, or exams that kind of get thrown in because the doctors don't take the time to want to find somebody to help the communication line being open, or to tell them exactly what's going on. And so it's shocking how many people of ethnic backgrounds or women who get treatment, and because the doctors fear the communication or don't know how to approach them about certain things, they just take liberties to provide certain types of care that these patients get billed for. And I think this may have come up at some point during, I think you may have touched on something to that effect in one of your presentations, but I think it's extremely important to have, for physicians to be able to have a high competency in intercultural communication for that reason, so that they're treating patients effectively, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah, another problem is that most recently a lot of physicians have been taking advantage of elderly patients. They are the closest ones to their generation to come over here to America, and so they don't fully understand how our medical system works, and then on top of that they are getting elderly and they're having troubles hearing and speaking and just doing everyday tasks. And so I've had some personal experience with my grandparents, and they went to a dentist and they told my grandma that she needed to remove all of her teeth, when in fact she didn't need to. They were just taking advantage of her age and kind of just using her just to get more money. So I think that's another big thing is age and your cultural background and all your values and differences.
Tagging on to that, I think it would be hard for one physician to be competent in 100 different cultural competencies and understand that. I'm wondering if you think that there are companies or there are services that are offering translation or cultural competency, or if you think that that's something that maybe you heard about in your research?
I haven't read about any yet, but most of the time from my experience when I was a workup technician, people who don't speak English, they'll bring like a family member or a friend to translate for them, but you can tell that they are very anxious and nervous that their problems aren't going to be translated across as what they wanted. So usually they will bring someone, but if they do have someone who speaks their language who works there, they will ask to have them there. But sometimes it doesn't always work like that. They get behind. And the doctors really do want them to understand what is wrong with them and to understand like what they need to do to get better. And I think it's important to just have the general idea of don't come in being nervous. The doctors want to help you. They're not against you. So also another way to answer your question, my mother is actually the chief of quality of care at Kaiser's. So she told me about when she was an OB delivering babies that they actually have a translation center that they get to call. And sometimes it's hard depending on the language you need. But let's say, for instance, if it's Spanish, it's easier to get someone on call for that language, and it's a phone call. And they put it on speaker. My mom said she would talk to the phone, the lady would translate it, and they'd give it to the patient, and the patient would interact that way. And they said it's pretty proficient, but the only problem is if it's a harder language, it's harder to find someone on call for that language. But they do have on-call centers for translations.
So the topic of your panel is developing intercultural communication competency, and it was really fascinating to hear you each talk about it from a different angle and a different discipline. How would you respond to or coach someone in that particular discipline who doesn't necessarily see the value in developing intercultural communication competency? Clearly you all are advocates for that, but there is a segment of the population who is kind of has blinders on to the need and the necessity and the importance and the value of developing intercultural communication competency. So how would you respond to someone within your particular field? Maybe you could go down the line, or if anyone wants to volunteer a response, or how even your peers possibly here at Pacific who don't necessarily see the value of study abroad or international experience or that intercultural communication competency.
I actually studied abroad with UOP over the summer in Guatemala, and I don't think you really value, you don't really have this larger mind frame of it until you go into someone else's culture and you have no idea, how to get around, where you are. I stayed with a host family, and I knew no Spanish going in, and they spoke no English. So it was, I lived in their house, and then my teacher did not speak any English either, my Spanish teacher. So it was, I learned very quickly because of that, but I think that, especially in the classroom, speaking from an educational point of view, you really sympathize with those students that are coming into your classroom, and because you've felt that way, you felt scared in a new place and lacked this information. And so I feel like just kind of gaining that mindset, you have to be put into it and walk in someone else's shoes for a while. And even in some of our education classes, we've done this where it's called Bafa Bafa. And basically we split the classroom in half, and half of the classroom went downstairs, and one half was the betas and the other half was the alphas. And we learned all the cultural norms and all the rules, and then they would send us certain people up or downstairs to interact. And so you get that sense of being an outsider and that sense of feeling puzzled and trying to figure out how to communicate effectively. And so I think that there's a lot of different activities to gain this, emotional connection to those people. So, yeah.
I would say another way to kind of prevent those blinders from happening. First of all, in our class, we actually did presentations on different countries, which helped us open our eyes to different cultures and kind of see the similarities and differences and know that, we aren't all that different from each other. There's probably one thing that's similar, either the way they celebrate things or their food or their fashion. There's some similarities. But another way I can think of why we have blinders is because our generation is so tech savvy that all we do is be on our phones and we don't really interact with other people anymore. So we kind of lose that one-to-one personal, conversation where, you could ask about what, your culture is. And I think now we're just so quiet and closed off of that we don't really talk about other cultures. So I think people in our society in this generation can maybe, think of that as a conversation topic and not so much, what you like to watch on Netflix. So.
I think there's definitely an importance in stressing the ability to be able to communicate effectively across cultures, and not just in terms of different countries, but there's cultures within cultures in America, in our society. And so in what I do, which is case management for veterans, I encounter a lot of different cultures within a culture. So different eras and different branches of service. For me, understanding how to talk to them in a way that they can understand, and also receive them in a way that's comfortable for them, will help me facilitate the kind of care that they need more effectively. We can get to the root of the problem easier if we're on the same page. And so it's definitely very important in the workplace, being able to critically think. Intercultural communication, I think, plays a huge role in that. And it's not just about, whether you're from different countries. Like I said, it could be just a lot smaller than that, a lot simpler than that. And that's going to be important in probably every aspect of life, whether you're going to the drive-through, trying to tell somebody what you want on your order, to, drafting up proposals and giving presentations. So I think it's definitely very, very important in the workplace. And in college right now, while we're building that foundation, it's going to really take us a lot further later.
Yeah, I definitely believe that being open-minded is important, especially if we're faced with difficulties of understanding another person's communication, like we can't understand their accents, or we can't understand where they're coming from because they come from a different background. But definitely being open-minded is the first step of pushing yourself to overcome that struggle of understanding another person. And I think intercultural communication, this class has definitely helped me in learning about other cultures as well. So I think taking this class is really important. I think other students should take this class too. And learning about other cultures is very interesting, so why not try to learn more about it?
To answer your question, intercultural communication competency is not only a valuable skill to have, but it's also a necessity. As I mentioned previously, in the last 30 years, intercultural marriages have increased by 7%. And there are statistics paired with that as well to show that there is also an increasing number of diverse backgrounds coming into the U.S. So it just, as time progresses, we will inherently be exposed to that, and it's going to be a necessity to be able to communicate effectively between people with different cultural backgrounds.
So we want to finish it off by saying thank you to all the presenters for sharing. And thank you to the audience for asking questions. We hope you learned a little something about intercultural communication.